Welcome back, honors. Oh man, so it's been a minute since we've had a flip, right? Sorry if I sound a little but I think I'm taking a cold on or something. But let's see if we can actually get this flip up with this without this file becoming like corrupted or messing up, much like the last one did, which is really a shame because I really feel like the last one was like rock solid. All right, so we left off here in your notes portion, right? Remember we have a big gap right now between your notes from class stuff and flips and then where the artworks themselves start, right? So just kind of like pick up right there, but we left off talking about, of course, Dante, his famous work being the Divine Comedy, broken up in three sections. We've got Paradiso, Purgatory, and the Inferno, right? So we discussed like the map of hell and like a lot of other little different segments and stuff like that. And Dean, is right down here. So let's move on though, because Renaissance art is not simply limited to the visual arts. It's also very, very, very expansive in literature and writing as well. All right, so Dante, Petrarch, and who was our third? Oh, St. Thomas Aquinas. They serve as like our bedrock foundation for the rest of Renaissance writing, but it is going to grow at incremental rates, right? Some people include Geoffrey Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales as a form of Renaissance writing. Some people have even reached as far as to include Shakespeare into Renaissance writing, which many of you are reading right now. Julius Caesar with Mr. Keogh. That book's terrible. Anyway, if you're going to read a good Shakespeare work, Midsummer Night's Dream, that's the way to go. All right, so now, going forward though, the first guy we got to talk about is this guy right here, Baldassare Castiglione, right? So Baldassare Castiglione is going to create a very, very famous piece of work known as the Courtier, right? And the great thing about this guy is he's also featured in my classroom, right? For those of you that can come in and actually point out where he is, he actually exists on my timeline, right? Now, Baldassare Castiglione is going to write a very famous book known as The Courtier, right? But before we can really talk about what The Courtier says, we got to talk about what a courtier is, right? Well, what is a courtier? A courtier is an allusion to courtly life when we're talking about the lives and the people that are surrounding kings and queens, right? So a courtier is an advisor or cohort to a king, right? So this person is then entrusted with giving advice, planning things for kings and queens. Basically, he's like a second-in-command type, right? So for a courtier to be able to function in this new Renaissance society, he has to have an outline to how he's supposed to behave. And that's why the book, The Courtier, by Castiglione, was so groundbreaking, right? He wanted to leave old, terrible, gross, nasty Middle Ages customs in the past and wanted to lurch forward and create a guide to how you should behave now in this new Renaissance era, right? And during the 1500s, this book was adopted and used as like the educational tome for all noble families here to follow, right? So if you were, because let's be honest, was the Renaissance really affecting like the poor? No, not really, right? So, but the courtier is going to be a great example of how the Renaissance did affect some of those noble classes, right? Because they're going to adopt this text and they're going to use it to instruct their children, right? So, a big one is like the ideal man, right? What is the ideal man according to Castiglione? There also is some slight sexism stuff in these things as well, which I apologize, ladies, but it was the 1500s. What are you going to do at this point? Now, they say the ideal man is supposed to be athletic, but not overactive, right? Good at games, not a gambler. Plays a musical instrument, knows history and literature, but also isn't arrogant about it, right? So you could say that this group of qualifiers is going to be the next thing that kind of leads you to the idea of a Renaissance man, right? So like all of these things applied to people like Da Vinci, maybe not so much Michelangelo because I don't think he's probably very athletic, but a lot of different factors. And like we're supposed to be a guidebook on how you yourself could become a Renaissance man, right? So like I believe that I'm a Renaissance man. I can play the recorder, all right? Yeah, 5th grade taught me a lot of good stuff. Now, the ideal woman, according to Castiglione, is supposed to be graceful, kind, lively but reserved, beautiful, and offers balance to a man. Unfortunately, they don't get their own real good set of things, which is really screwed up, but sorry, guys. Now, anyway, moving on. So then we have this guy right here, Niccolo Machiavelli, right? Niccolo Machiavelli is probably one of the most important writers of all of European history, period, right? Some people would probably consider him like the most important writer of European history, but I don't know if I would go that far, all right? So, but his book, The Prince, was absolutely, like, earth-shattering, right? We'll talk about, like, the political, like, reasons why he wrote this really, really fast. So, the Niccolo Machiavelli, where's he from? Well, he's from Florence, right? He's from Florence, was alive during the time of Michelangelo, right? Was a very, very prominent figure amongst the community. However, he never really made it up as high as he possibly could under the Medici regime, right? So remember, the Medicis control Florence, right? Under Cosimo and Lorenzo and Piero the Gouty. So like all of these different people are from the Medici family are controlling Florence, right? And they don't just now, and by this point, they don't informally control Florence. For a long time, the Medicis worked behind the shadows, right? Or not behind the shadows, but behind the curtains in the shadows, right? Trying to control Florence from like almost like a distance, right? They would rig elections. They would skim off the top tax money. They would do a lot of different things and then also push government officials to do things that they had suggested, right? Well, Niccolo Machiavelli never rose very far underneath them. Well, then came along this other guy, Girolamo Savonarola, right? And Savonarola actually adopted this new idea where he was a monk, right? He was a monk, and he immediately starts wigging the heck out, right? He's like, the people of Florence and the Renaissance culture is nothing but complete with vanities, right? He outlashed against perfume, jewelry, expensive dress, anything distracting from God. Every time you saw him, he was wearing a black robe, right? Had no hair, and would always have a hood on. Like always, right? So Savonarola also then predicted, he said, I've had a divine premonition that Cyrus the Great is going to return and he's going to destroy Italy and usher us into a new era of cleanliness away from these vanities and things like blah, 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 blah. And weirdly enough, who do you think this is going to make upset? The Pope is going to start getting really upset about this. But then out of nowhere, Charles, the King of France, the young King of France, starts storming through Italy and destroying everything and wiping out different areas in Milan and all this other stuff. So people were like, oh my God, Savonarola was right. There is a new Cyrus the Great on the way. So everyone starts meeting up in Florence and starts burning all of their things, right? Starts burning their perfumes, their vanities, all their stuff that distracts from God. And Savonarola has basically de facto had a religious revolution, right? So the craziest thing about it, though, who is the family that could never adopt Savonarola's policies? The Medicis, right? They are nothing but vanities, okay? They are paying for the birth of Venus, for the Primavera. They're like using their money and their wealth to find ways to infiltrate the papacy, right? So the Medicis were then ran out of Florence by Savonarola's followers, right? And when they did get run out, Niccolo Machiavelli rises up and becomes a political advisor to the Savonarola regime, right? So while he's getting a lot of experience during this entire process, he starts really begging himself one central question. Is it better, write this down, is it better for a ruler to be feared or loved, right? So, which is something I believe that you've all probably asked yourself before in a way. Is it better for a ruler to be respectfully feared, much like you probably view your parents? Or is it better for a ruler to be loved and possibly lead to disrespect later on, right? So Niccolo Machiavelli also then, ironically enough, looks to the Pope, Alexander VI, and says, you're not the leader I want to analyze, and then looks at his illegitimate son, Caesar Borgia, as the perfect model of the prince, right? And some of you are like, wait a minute, illegitimate son, Pope. Remember, the popes weren't the most, rule-following crowd on the planet at this point, right? So he begins to outline this book off this guy named Caesar Borgia, and he concludes in his book, while in exile, by the way, because the Medicis do eventually come back and they like get Savonarola, or like because Savonarola was actually tried before the Inquisition for heresy and burned at the stake in front of the Medici's old house in the Palazzo del Signore in Florence. Sorry, Savonarola. Now burned much like he tried to burn all those vanities. But what's going to end up happening in exile? Machiavelli writes this text and of the Prince, and he concludes that it is better for a ruler to be feared rather than loved. Right? Now, his ideas, though, have gotten twisted over time, right? Because everyone only ever says that one half of the quote. Or they always say, the end justifies the means, right? They're like, oh, that sounds like he means that murder's okay, right? You're going to be sitting, flash forward in your life. Ironically enough, like I'm like symbolizing it right now. Flash forward in your life. You know, like in a sitcom, how like little wavy lines come up. You're going to be sitting in college one day in a coffee shop doing your work, minding your own business. And you're going to be probably drinking something like very, very nice, like chicory dark coffee. What would I do without it? You're going to be sitting there, though. You're going to be doing your work, probably getting ready for midterms, something like that. And you're going to hear in the back of your, and coming in the back of your hearing, not actively listening to them, a bunch of kids surrounded by some tool bag wearing a beret. All right? So, and he's going to be like, our government is so disgusting. They're so vile and gross and arrogant. They're so Machiavellian. Pause. All right? So Machiavellian ideas are not necessarily mean or crass, right? They've just been twisted over time, right? So this whole idea about it is better for a ruler to be feared rather than loved, no one ever finishes the quote, all right? The second half of the quote goes like this: but he ought not be hated, all right? So that therein there in a sense gives you the idea of the perfect Machiavellian ruler is a ruler that is actually appreciated by his people, even though he may not be appreciated outside of his own country, right? So know what a real Machiavellian ruler is. And don't be the guy in the beret. All right, so sorry, I'm like burping a little bit. It's gross. So now, and we talked about this a little bit on in class the other day. The Renaissance is also going to begin to spread north, right? The Renaissance is going to spread north through trade. Many artists are going to be persecuted for their work, and some are going to flee like Italy as well and go north to England, France, Germany. And also a lot of these other artists just kind of popped up and originated in these other places, including the Netherlands, England. Germany, remember, didn't exist yet. It was still referred to as the Holy Roman Empire. France did exist, though. But the Netherlands and the Holy Roman Empire seem to be the big hub of like all of your northern Renaissance artists, right? The big difference, too, though, hold on, don't ignore that. Oh, here we go. All right, so a good way to kind of describe the Northern art like movement is that they're gonna try and depict scenes of more like real people, poor merchants, wealthy, etc. Like for example, when we looked at the Arnolfini work, right? The Arnolfinis were two regular people that existed in real time, right? And then Jan van Eyck just painted a picture of them because he was paid to do so, right? And he also did it in immense detail with a lot less bright colors and kind of pulling away from direct theologic themes, right? So you need to know that, but we did talk about that a little bit in class. But then also another thing that's going to happen is the printing revolution, right? So during this entire time period, Johannes Gutenberg is going to step up and he's going to invent the printing press. Now, first of all, the reason why I do that is because he didn't actually invent the printing press. The Chinese and the Koreans actually had designed printing presses long before he ever did, but theirs were made out of wood, all right? So a wooden design is going to soak up a lot of that ink, and their designs for the types, the individual little letters, they're going to degrade over time. They're going to degrade very, very quickly as well. And so what Johannes Gutenberg does is he creates a metal-typed printing press. So his don't degrade nearly as fast, right? So he took those types, those little individual little letters, right, much like a Scrabble tile, and he made them out of metal instead of out of wood like the Asiatic designs, right? And it's going to do a lot of great things. It's going to make books cheaper. The very first book printed is going to be the Bible. It's going to It's going to expose all classes to literature. Well, not all classes, but literacy rates are going to climb. And then also, they're going to become centers of political dissidence, right? So they're going to become areas for like political propaganda and stuff like that. Almost like areas where revolutionaries will hide and like shoot out secret pamphlets and stuff like that, right? But the printing revolution is huge, okay? Fun fact about the printing revolution as well. How many types of letters do we have? Oh, Mr. Terry, my name's Dean. We have uppercase and lowercase letters. We do have uppercase and lowercase letters, Dean, but do you know why they're called that? It's because in the print shops, since a capital letter was used much less often, they were actually kept in a higher case above a printer's head, hence uppercase, and then all the lowercase letters, or your like normal size letters, your like lower cases, are going to be kept in a lower case below them. And that's where the word comes from. All right, so, but that's huge. Oh, last thing too, the printing revolution was also made possible, not by viewers like you, not like PBS, but was made possible by the fact that Muslims in North Africa had refined the process of making paper. And they actually now had much more paper available for printing. All right, so that's it. That's the flip for this weekend. I will see you guys in class on Monday. Let's keep kicking butt and finishing up these artworks. I'll see you guys later. Have a great one.